is if you have got to start the presentation again. That's what happens when you start the recording. Just a second, everybody. So all of you have been muted and the camera switched off automatically because we started the recording, because that is German data privacy laws. So back to the housekeeping. If you have questions, please ask them in the chat, except for the third part of this webinar where we will have an open discussion. If you want to speak during the discussion part, please raise your hand. Please mute your mic unless you are given the floor, and please bear in mind that this is not a stage for individual commercial pitches. So today, I did the welcome here already. The second part is going to be a presentation by Dr. Ralph Adeboye on the Nigerian cocoa and palm oil sector and how it is preparing for zero deforestation compliance. He will be presenting on the successes, the challenges, and the support needs that are still out there. In the third part, I'm going to just give a quick overview on some updates on the Aim for Commodities project before I go into the DPI building blocks around deforestation risk assessments. And in the last part, we are going to have a discussion. Now, first, I want to ask the question, who is in the room? Unfortunately, the polls are not working today, so we would like to kindly ask to just present yourself quickly in the chat while we are continuing with the presentation. So just as a recap for what we are doing here. This is a webinar where we give the floor to a producing country actor to share their successes, challenges, and support needs in light of zero deforestation regulations, the most prevalent, imminent, and important at the moment of which is the EU deforestation regulation. If you are a producing country actor and would like to present in one of the forthcoming webinars, please reach out to us by writing to diasca@giz.de. That is the email address presented here. You can simply click on it as you can with all the links that you will see in this presentation. After the producing country input, we will take a deep dive into one building block of digital public infrastructure. And finally, we will have a discussion where everyone that is present can participate. Are there any questions on this? If yes, please raise your hand quickly. Okay, seems like everything is clear. So without further ado, I'm giving the floor to Dr. Ralph Adeboye, who is a lead remote sensing scientist at the Forestry Research Institute of Nigeria, to give us an input on how Nigeria is preparing for zero deforestation regulations. Over to you, Ralph. Please try to take over control, and if it doesn't work, we'll just go slide by slide.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonas. Good afternoon, everybody. Jonas, I guess everybody's hearing. Could you hear me
hear you very well. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Loud and clear.
I'm briefly presenting on preparing the Nigerian cocoa and oil palm sector for zero deforestation regulations. This is a joint effort between the federal government of Nigeria, the Food Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and the GEF7 project. The GEF7 project, FAO GEF7 project is for the food system land use and restoration impact program in Nigeria. My name is Ralph Adeboye. As he said, I'm a lead scientist for tropical forest ecosystem and climate change modeling at Forestry Research Institute of Nigeria. And then I am also the national coordinator for integrated land management That's the ILM for JEF7 FAO follow program in Nigeria. So we're looking at the current state of the Nigerian cocoa and oil palm industries in Nigeria. The intervention by JEF7 follow efforts and the initiative on zero deforestation is successful achieved, challenging, and the future direction. Let me start this. Nigeria is one of the major cocoa producers in the world. We're the fourth largest cocoa producer. It's economic, very, very important economic cash crop for Nigeria. Incidentally, that's one of the few crops in Nigeria that is produced that we don't have a local recipe. Everything is exported. That means it's produced in Nigeria, but it's not consumed majorly in Nigeria. The challenge, cocoa sector faces challenges such as outdated farming practice, such as continuous slash and burn, environmental degradation that impact productivity. The oil palm sector is a bit different from the cocoa sector. We produce a whole lot of oil palm, but Nigeria consumes so much of the same oil palm. So unlike cocoa, export on cocoa oil palm is very, very low compared to cocoa. Oil palm gives a bit of less contribution to the GDP in Nigeria in terms of export quota. But one of those few things is that we still have rapid deforestation due to oil palm expansion and then the unsustainable practices that same as cocoa. Current states of the cocoa and oil palm industries in Nigeria. Now, here we have the major producing states in Nigeria, which is about 10. Then we have minor producing states and upcoming producing states. And the rest of the states from the middle belt up north are not producing cocoa because of the rainfall factor and the soils. But the southern belt actually is the major producer of cocoa, especially Ondo and Cross River State. Population of smallholder farmers in Nigeria for cocoa estimated to be between 450,000 to 500,000 smallholder farmers in Nigeria. That's from the CFA, that's the Cocoa Farmer Association of Nigerian data. We have almost 284,000 tons projected to rise to 500 tons by 2026, FAO 2023 studies. 4 million oil palm smallholder farmers in Nigeria because why do we have smallholder farmers are so much than cocoa? It's planted with other crops. It's more of an agroforestry crops, except for big industries that do only mono oil palm. But in cocoa, you can have so much of cocoa mono across the landscapes of Nigeria. The EUDR conundrums, when I say conundrums, that means the EUDR problems. EUDR brought a regulation that every one of us knows about, and we discovered that we are backward in fulfilling the compliance, the risk compliance, the zero deforestation, like most other third world nations. So I call it conundrum because it's a problem, and we're trying to solve it. It's an headache. We're trying to get the solution to the problem. And this is where we have. Why conundrum? Because we have data gaps for fulfilling EUDR compliance, unknown number of cocoa and oil palm farmers, lack of geolocated data on smallholder farmers, non-availability of the land use land cover maps for Nigeria. So JEF7 efforts and initiative on zero deforestation and verified sourcing area, VSA, that's what the JEF7 project is into. That's one of the major areas that where the ILM project decided to deviate into. Where I showed initially the maps that showed several cocoa states, both minor and major, and upcoming states. But in JEF7, we are focused on only Ondo and Cross River State, two states in the Niger Delta, close to the Atlantic Ocean with good rainfall and very high level of forest conservation, high level of forest remaining. But for instance, in Cross River has the largest forest estate left in Nigeria. So Jeff7 decided to use those two states as a pilot states for the zero deforestation and VSA initiatives. The training facilitated by the FAO, one of the few things we needed to do is, first of all, to know where we are. So the FAO team decided to train locals and scientists here on Collect Heart, Sepal.io, Follow Earth Maps, Forest Grant, and WIPS. Since August last year, we've been on it, though there are other project interventions that has trained others on Sepal.io or Collector. But for the first time, Follow Earth Maps, Forest Grant, and WIPS was introduced to us. I will not go into elaborate into this because I believe that my colleague Jonas will be taking us into the real thing about Forest Grant and WIPS, which is part of the Follow Earth Maps. This is a training in March by Laura from the FAO. Part of the picture shows she was taking us in March. She took a session in March with her colleagues in Cross River State, and then with teams whom she trained, and these are teams from FAO. In total, 125 people have been trained so far. Now, the verified sourcing area data collection with Forest Grant. We were introduced to Forest Grant and taken by Jonas, who is here today, and who I think will be able to show us what Forest Grant is all about. And so, based on the training, we decided to start data collection for verified sourcing areas. So that's geolocating farms, taking data of farmers, and geolocating all the farms, both for polygon mapping and point mapping using Forest Grant. The first thing was community mobilization, intensive field campaign, which includes geolocation of farms, polygons, and points, through the deployment of trained hands to the field. Those who were trained at the session with Laura and with Jonas, and those who were subsequently trained again, because we had 2 tiers of training. There was a training for trainers, then we deploy the trainers to train others across 3 states, 2 states including the federal capital Abuja. And then out of those who were selected and then sent to the field for data collection. So the verified sourcing area data acquisition, we were into geolocating cocoa farms and oil palm farms in 2 states, in Cross River and Ondo State. The project commences in April and ends in June. Why do we have to commence in April? That's the beginning of the rainy season. The training was in March, end of March. We quickly wanted to test drive our knowledge, what we have acquired, and see how far we could go with data, with the training and those who have been trained. So we commenced the deployment of staffs into the field in April. By the end of June, we stopped because this is the rainy season. The terrains are bad, and it's difficult to navigate areas when there is heavy rainfall. So this is a community mobilization. Each of them were equipped with mobilizing community where they are going to take data, and then to address and to tell them the benefit of VSA to the community, so that they will have a full cooperation of the locals in the area. And then this is data collections. The lady on the left is taking data from a oil palm farm for VSA, which is using Forest Grant, and with the bikes are taking data from a cocoa farm. Let me quickly say this, that it's difficult to navigate some of this terrain with vehicles. So we decided to use bikes, hired bike, and then a state government gave some bikes. The Cross River State government gave motorbikes to staffs, and so that they could navigate areas where get to farmers as quick as possible. It's easier to go with 1-2 people on a bike and then navigate the area. Total number of geolocated farms so far, after after close to 90 days, we have 12,893 data collected from the 2 states, geolocated farms collected so far. And what we're doing currently is we're doing data cleaning. I said end of June, this is the first week in July. We're doing data cleaning and we're doing zero risk analysis with WIPs. My colleague Jonas will take us on WIPs today, will give us some insight on the use of WIPs and the algorithm within WIPs. So I believe that I don't have to go deep into WIPs and risk analysis. This is for Ondo State. We have done a bit of deforestation analysis for some of the data we got. We have European EUDR risk level, and we have done a Kringen and mapping to show that 0 means there's little or no risk, and 4 means there is very, very high risk. So the color amber shows the level of risk within the state in the areas that has been covered. That's the level of risk we are seeing, which shows that those areas with high risk with 3 and 4, we have to involve legislations and maybe the gazetting. I assume that most of these places are reserved area, protected areas where farmers has been for ages. So that's a local problem for us here. But based on WIPS analysis, the risk analysis by WIPS, it's easy for us to know where there are heavy risk, where there are low risk in terms of EUDR compliance. In terms of market, in terms of exports and sort of obtaining and sending out to Europe for exporting cocoa. This is for cocoa. I believe that this maps is good and the analysis shows where the heavy risk are will be for industries taken in from Nigeria, taking cocoa from Nigeria. Future directions and recommendations, quickly. We see target between those 3 states. We're targeting 40,000 farmers for both Ondo and Cross River State. So our target is that at the end of October, rainy season stops at October. The rain stops in October, and October to March or early April. Between October and April, we're able to target 40,000 plus farmers in the 2 states for the GEF7 FAO project in Nigeria. Further funding required for the remaining states. I know that there are other organizations within Nigeria who are in discussions for geolocation of farms, for land use, land cover mapping. The remaining states that GEF7 isn't covering will be their funding source that they need to liaise, that organizations are liaising with the federal government and with donor funding to have a geolocations of farms and to have a land use, land cover for those areas. Conclusion: addressing challenges. Identifying and tackling existing challenges is crucial to promoting sustainable practice in agriculture in Nigeria. We understand the challenges. We are head on tackling the challenges or taking up the challenges of EUDR compliance within the agricultural sector in Nigeria, especially in cocoa, in oil palm and coffee producing areas. We're head on trying to do that, and I assume that by the end of next year we should be able to make all data available. Now, let me quickly say before I thank the FAO team and the Nigerian ILM team that our data will be open source. We have spoken with the technical director of the project, the F7 project. What is promised is that we want to inculcate, and Jonas, you can hear me clearly about that, inculcate our data into the heart maps. I spoke with him, he said, I asked him the question, how do we share our data? Our data will be public because it's donor funding. So we're going to be sharing those data on the heart maps interface that is being handled by the FAO. I acknowledge the FAO team. Thank you very much for every member of the FAO team who has helped us, who has trained us, who has mobilized and been there at all times. and my colleagues at the Integrated Land Management team, I acknowledge them. Thank you very much. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ralph. To the audience, are there any immediate questions that you have to Ralph? Please shoot. There's one from Nico, please. Please open the microphone and ask a question.
Yeah, sorry, I had to agree to open my microphone. Sorry. Thank you so much for the great presentation. I'm just curious. I found in my experience that many of the small holders, especially of cocoa in Nigeria, seem to be producing. The trees are actually growing within forested areas. I was just wondering if there was any kind of special treatment for like this sustainable farming where the geolocation of the smallholder farm would actually be in the middle of the forested area, but without having any impact on the forest itself. I don't know if there's any insight into that issue, or if that's even an issue to be concerned about.
Yeah, thank you. You recall that I did make certain allusion that those are legal problems within the Nigerian ecosystems. Most of I acknowledge that most of the cocoa farms are within the protected area, and some of them have been there for ages. So just like I said, one of those things that I know that in certain fora in Nigeria is that they're trying to make those places gazette the forest reserves, because gazette the forest reserve or extend the forest reserve into other areas. I know that. Then the issue of agroforestry, you understand that most of the time the cocoa farms in Nigeria are agroforestry related. That they are planting of trees with tree crops, forest trees with cocoa. So those are areas that I know there have been discussions of legal issues, what to do with those the cocoa farms within. But be that as it may, I want to say that there are other cocoa that are not within the forest areas, that are in marginal lands owned by communities, owned by purchased not within the forest area. That's why if I didn't do the maps that shows the 8 maps of where the forest, or the what do you call it, the protected area, where you discover that those on 4, the high level risk, are within the protected area. I should have done that. Sorry for that omission. But what I'm saying is that we know that. But we know that is a legal issue within the Nigerian system. It's that we have to find solution to that, and which I think in the foreseeable future there should be a solution to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have another question from Bernard Wright. Please, Bernard.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that talk. It was very interesting. I've got 1 or 2 questions. The first is around with all these polygons that you're recording now. Do you plan on linking it up to some of those global standards like the AgStack asset registry, so these fields won't have to be recorded again in the future? And then the second is, but what are your thoughts on the accuracy around WISP for those smaller size plantations that you'd be looking at when it comes to identifying deforestation? And then third might be around around ground. Do you know what that's built on? Is that built on kind of that's fully open source code, I guess? Is it built on like open data kit type stuff, or is it relatively similar? Yeah, so triple barrel question there.
When it comes to when it comes to the last question, Jonas will speak about that, I guess. We are end users. We didn't build it. Yeah, but in terms of accuracy, I'll tell you that it's very. I think looking at other softwares and things, other software like other softwares that take data, geolocation data, these are innovations that it's above others. I've been in this system for quite a while. The reason is it's difficult for if we send a field officer to the field, there's a back check that shows that if the officer didn't go to the field, we easily could know that the officer isn't where at the location. There's a two-part measure. You take the GPS, it takes the geolocation of the farm, and when the officer is checking out or is logging out, it still takes the location of the current position where the farm is. So I could be in Chicago and takes data for Nigeria. So it's going to show I showed data for Nigeria. I took data in Nigeria, but my location will be in Chicago or will be in Berlin, which shows that, okay, I wasn't actually at the right field. But the field officer we sent in with bikes, with provisions, were to go and locate the farmers at that locations. And we have divided the data sets. That's we created polygons of each areas where they ought to be. So every week there's a particular spot they must be at a particular time. So we expect data from that spot, that area in particular. If it's to the west of a location, we do not expect data from the east of that location. So that's all I could say about the excellence, the good work on that ground is doing for us here in Nigeria. Thank you.
All right, before I try to answer Bernard's other questions from my side, there's still a question by Jacob Abramovitz in the chat that goes to you, Ralph. That is, was the offline data collection functionality important for the usage of Ground app? And what is the internet connectivity like in the region of Nigeria that you were collecting data in?
Please repeat the question.
It's also in the chat. I think you can read it there. It is, was the offline data collection functionality, was it important?
Hello, will you repeat the question, please?
Yes, was the offline data collection. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yes, yeah. Okay. There's an offline data collection functionality in Ground. Was that important for your data collection campaign?
Excellent. Yeah. Reason is not every of the smallholder farm we visited are linked to
Maybe you can stop sharing your screen, Ralph, then you'll have a better connection.
Okay. Hold on, let me do that.
You know, I'll just take over sharing the screen. That will automatically stop it for you.
Okay, I've done that. So the offline was very, very useful because most of the farm holders are located where there are no networks. So coming back into it was very, very useful for us.
Okay, that is good to know. Now, let me just go back to the question by Bernard. First thing about the accuracy of WISP and deforestation risk assessment, I will just give a presentation, a technical deep dive on what WISP works like just in a minute. So that will hopefully answer the question then.
Okay.
The other question, Bernard, about Ground, could you repeat that? I didn't get it entirely, what you were asking there.
Okay. Yeah. The offline data capturing was excellent.
Okay.
Now, I
Ralph,
think Ralph,
to Bernard.
Yeah. Oh, my question was around what is it built on? Is it built on Open Data Kit type of functionality? Is it relatively similar? In how it's used? Yeah, just a general kind of question there on that.
Okay, so Ground is fully open source. The GitHub code can be forked and cloned, but generally it runs on a Google Firebase. So we have a Google Firebase account by FAO, and all the data that are collected with Ground at the moment are technically running on our Firebase. And the data is safe with us. We have data protection terms and conditions around that. And when somebody is collecting on our Ground instance, the data still belongs to them. Now, if you're a commercial entity, for example, you may want to clone Ground and run it on your own Firebase, depending on what your needs are. I hope that answers the question. You were talking about Open Data Kit. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that.
Yeah, that's just a similar type of tool built with yeah, it's a few years old now, but it's
Okay.
it's open source as well.
Yeah, then it's not running on Open Data Kit, but we have Google developers that helped us to develop this, and it's running on a Google Firebase. So that's how Ground works.
Okay, brilliant, perfect. I'll take a look. Thanks a million.
Sure. All right then. I think the part of my presentation that you can see is still the first image. Okay, do you see the aim for commodities slide now?
Yes.
Probably you do. Great. Okay, thanks.
Yes.
So thank you very much for your presentation, Ralph. So in the following, let me just give you a quick recap on how the Aim for Commodities project is designed to answer to the specific needs and implementation challenges of producing country stakeholders. So in this project, FAO focuses on 3 work streams that are closely aligned with the building blocks of digital public infrastructure. Those are the further development of the WISP deforestation risk assessment application and the integration of national mapping resources for improved risk assessments. Then we are working on upscaling geolocation efforts in the field through top-down and bottom-up approaches, notably through employing open forest ground for field data collection. But we're also investigating possibilities of automated field boundary detection in order to fill the remaining mapping gaps that are still out there. So we are trying to get as many relevant farm plots mapped as possible. So I have to say that the automated field boundary detection, especially for the very small plots that we see for smallholders of cocoa and coffee, are particularly difficult to detect, even more so if we're talking about agroforestry. We are furthermore fostering the implementation of a decentralized asset registry that is owned by the countries and provides actors dealing with regulatory mechanisms with a standardized geometry format that is easy to use, easy to integrate, and that simplifies geolocation information sharing along the traceability chains. In order to achieve these goals, all the 3 work streams will be flanked by efforts to bring relevant actors together, such as we're doing right in this moment. The development of training materials and capacity building missions, then further development of digital public infrastructure solutions, which are WISP, Ground, and the asset registry. In May and April, we did conduct field missions in Kenya, Colombia, Vietnam, and Laos to scope the possibility of integrating national forest monitoring and land cover maps into WISP, to conduct capacity building workshops on ground and to map farmland in the field, and to consult with key stakeholders about a national implementation of the decentralized asset registry. Now, the focus countries of the Aim for Commodities project are Kenya, Laos, Colombia, and Vietnam. So Nigeria is unfortunately not one of them. But from my latest mission there, I can say that we already have identified a potential implementer for the asset registry. We had some successful capacity building workshops on ground, and we're going to upscale them significantly by next month. And regarding the integration of national forest monitoring and land cover maps, we're in discussion with the Kenya Forest Service, but it remains to be seen what the outcome will be. Furthermore, there's going to be an e-learning module on ground, which will be available roughly by the end of the month. We will inform you through our newsletter then. Now, regarding the integration of national forest monitoring and land cover maps into WISP, that brings us to today's technical deep dive on digital public infrastructure building blocks. So you probably, hopefully, remember our overview of the building blocks of digital public infrastructure. And today we will deep dive on 3 building blocks that are united in one solution developed by the Forest Monitoring and Data Platform at FAO. And that is WISP. WISP is short for What is in that plot. WISP brings together multiple publicly available map layers and runs them through a transparent decision tree to help stakeholders with zero deforestation compliance. Before we start with the technical deep dive, I want to ask you a question. What maps relevant to deforestation risk analysis do you know? Since the poll isn't functioning today, please just write into the chat what maps relevant to deforestation risk analysis you know. Giving you guys 1 minute for that. So kindly, if you know one, please write it here. Okay. I'm going to start with one of the most obvious ones. Yeah, we have the UFO map coming up. JAXA, that's also very, very good. Yeah, Jacob Abramovitz is a professional working with us, so he already has quite some of the some of those that are less known, but also very relevant. Okay, so let's have a look at this. The maps that are out there and that are relevant to deforestation are actually some of these. This is just a selection. That's definitely not all of them. So we got the EU JRC map of tree cover 2020. Then there's also the Global Land Analysis and Discovery map that has been created by Hansen et al. At the University of Maryland. We have the World Cover map by the European Space Agency. Then there are different national and regional tree cover maps and many more. But also relevant to deforestation out there are commodity maps, for example, one of which was already mentioned by Jacob. There are the FDEP community model layers. Those are global palm probability maps as well as global cocoa probability maps. Recently, one was launched for coffee as well. That was just last week. And then also, again, it's national and regional land use and land cover maps. And then we have the more obvious ones. It's the deforestation alert maps, where deforestation is already in the name. That is the red forest disturbance alerts map by the University of Wageningen in the Netherlands. And then also, again, the GLAD map, Global Land Analysis and Discovery, which also has some layers on global forest change. And lastly, for the deforestation alert maps, there's also the Modus Fire maps. So when there are forest fires happening, it's often also an indication for deforestation happening, whether it's natural or man-made. And what's important here is that all of these can deliver supporting or contradicting evidence on deforestation. And that is because when we're talking about zero deforestation regulations, specifically the EUDR, we have a cutoff date of December 31st, 2020. So when we have supporting evidence that there was deforestation before versus after, or if we have contradicting evidence that something that is maybe discovered as tree cover by one of these maps, but discovered as crop cover by one of these maps, then we have contradicting evidence there. So to go into this in a little more detail, I'm going to show you now how WISP is working. So WISP comes in 2 different fashions. On the left, you can see the WISP Earth Map application. In WISP Earth Map, you can draw or upload a geometry and toggle all the different data sets relevant to deforestation. It's very practical for visualization purposes and to understand transparently how WISP works. On the right, you can see the WISP API. It is less visual, but here you can upload hundreds of geometries at once to get a risk assessment, which you can't really do in a practical manner in WISP Earth Map. So now let me first show you what WISP Earth Map looks like and how it works. In order to do that, I need to get out of the presentation here. Share my screen instead. Can you see my screen? I suppose you can. So to get to WISP Earth Map, you go to wisp.earthmap.org. When you're on this page, you may sign in with an email or a Google account, but you can also access anonymously. So there's not really a barrier if you want to just try. Now, WISP Earth Map, as I said, is really great for the visualization purposes. So I'm just going to show you one of our example plots. I'm going to zoom in on Ghana here, which is one of the biggest cocoa producers in the world. Or, you know, for that matter, as we were talking about Nigeria, let me actually zoom into Nigeria. No. Okay. Here's the Ghana example plot. Let me stick to that one. It'll take too much time to zoom out and in. So this is an example plot that we have for Ghana. And when I zoom out just a little bit, what we see here in green is the JRC Global Forest Cover Map for 2020. So according to that one, already there's no forest cover in that plot. What I can do now here is run the WISP algorithm over this plot. I click on the plot to select it. Then here I select the script, WISP supply chain due diligence. I click on process. And then I get this output here. What we see here is a plot of a size of 2.78 hectares. That is roughly 5 or 6 acres if I convert right in my head, 6 or 7. And what we see here is that there are 4 out of 7 tree cover maps indicating tree cover for this plot. Now, JRC is not one of them. It has 0%, which we can also see here visually. But there is, for example, the Japanese, the JAXA tree cover map, which apparently has 100%. So we can have a closer look at that and just toggle on the JAXA map. And suddenly we see here that according to the JAXA map, there's a lot of dense forest and some non-dense forest. Let's have a look at some more of the statistics here. So the ESA map, for example, which we have down here, ESA world cover for 2020-2021. It also indicates tree cover for that place. Here in dark green, the legend says this is tree cover. We can also look for 2020. Looks almost the same. Detects a little bit more of shrubland. Let's have a look at the statistics again. So now we also have agricultural land cover here. And now this becomes very interesting because in terms of deforestation, it's good for us to know if at 2020, a map product already detected a crop there. And here it says that according to this cocoa cover map of 2020, there's 100% cocoa cover. So going here on the left to agriculture, I can switch on, it is the cocoa farming maps by ETH University. And that one detects that this is all cocoa. And we also have the map that has been produced by the Forest Data Partnership, which we are part of, which is this one. And that detects 38.9% cocoa cover there. And now if we scroll further down, we also have this red column here, which says that there has been glad tree cover loss in between 2000 and 2020. I'm just going to switch off all the other ones that are here. Now we just have the satellite image background again. And now let's have a look at the glad tree cover loss, which is this one. Let's have a look at the legend. And now what we can see here is that the GLAD map by University of Maryland did detect that there has been forest loss. And if we look closer at the legend here, we see there's a lot of blue. So it is all these years here before 2020. We also have this brownish color here, that's presumably 2007. So what we can see here is there was some, probably, not for sure, but probably there was some deforestation that happened in this plot before 2020. Now, is that relevant to the EUDR? Well, if we were an audience with everybody around, we could have this a little more interactive, but I'm just going to say it out loud. No, it is not relevant to the EUDR in the sense that if deforestation happened before 2020, it doesn't count for the EUDR. It can even, quite to the contrary, be evidence to alleviate the risk of deforestation, because if it was deforested before 2020, it cannot be deforested after 2020. So it even makes EUDR compliance more likely. It is a bit of a paradox that deforestation is actually, so deforestation before 2020 is helpful for deforestation risk compliance, EUDR compliance. But that's how laws work sometimes, right? Okay, now that I have given you this overview, let me just switch back. So yeah, what is it that we do with all these colorful maps that I just showed you? It is important to understand that no single map is perfect and can fully prove compliance, because there are different definitions and classification systems, and maps are usually created with machine learning algorithms, which inevitably always have significant margins of error. As you saw, for example, we have two different maps on Cocoa cover. One says there was 100% in the plot. Another says that there was 38.9% in the plot. We therefore advocate for bringing multiple different data sets together for a sound risk assessment. We call that the convergence of evidence approach. Please note that maps are not proof, but they can support compliance claims. National or regional maps are usually more precise than global maps, and getting these into WISP can significantly improve the accuracy of risk assessments. We therefore advocate for national actors to kindly share their land use land cover maps with us, or even more precise tree cover and commodity cover maps if they have them available. So it is quite encouraging that Ralph, you just said that you are willing to share with us a lot of the data that you collected, because they can also help in creating better maps. That said, the maps that you just saw, none of them is created by us, the team at FAO. It is all publicly available maps, most of them at a global level, some of them at a regional or national level, and have been created by other actors. All we do with WISP is we bring them together so that you can use WISP to do a quick deforestation risk assessment with a transparent algorithm. It is not perfect. None of them will ever be perfect, but it is helpful to have supporting evidence for your compliance claims with zero deforestation regulations. That is why we say that open, transparent processes are needed that are reproducible, because controlling bodies will be hard to convince that plots are deforestation-free without proof. So even if you have a service provider that says, yeah, this is deforestation-free, they will need to prove that to the competent authorities if there are so-called grievance cases. So going with this fully open, transparent approach, this is something that can be easily understood also by the competent national authorities. And we do know from the German competent authority, for example, that they are also very interested in WISP. To better understand how the deforestation risk assessment through WISP works, let us have a look at the WISP decision tree. Now, I hope everybody is still awake. Some of you sitting in Europe might be heavily affected by the heat wave. And I know that these flowcharts can be overwhelming, but I promise this is the only one today. This one is very important to understand how WISP works, so please focus extra attentively on this one. This flowchart shows the inputs, the decision tree, and the output. In the left-hand column, we see a selection of the publicly available map products that I mentioned earlier. For forest and tree cover, there's, for example, the widely known UFO JRC map of global tree cover in 2020. There's the Global Land Analysis and Discovery map from the Uni of Maryland. There's a map from the European Space Agency ESA, as well as the Japanese Space Agency JAXA, and a couple more. Furthermore, there are maps with information on the cultivation of UDR-relevant commodities. For example, palm oil and cocoa. Also, the coffee map has recently been released by the Forest Data Partnership. And national commodity maps, if they are available, can also play into this. Finally, very important, but not the only decisive factor, there are maps on forest disturbances, the ones from the University of Maryland, as well as from the Wageningen University in the Netherlands, and the well-known MODIS maps on wildfires. These maps for the disturbances are disaggregated into disturbances before and after the end of 2020. That's very relevant because the EUDR has the cutoff date at the end of 2020, and these disturbances before 2020 do not count, respectively even help to claim deforestation-free compliance, because deforestation before 2020 can even prove deforestation-freeness after 2020. Now, as can be seen in column 2, the plot data, either as points or as polygons, are screened against all these maps, and the zonal statistics are calculated for each individual map from the left-hand column. Zonal statistic means calculating the percentage of pixels from the maps on the left-hand side for the input plot. That can be, for example, 26% tree cover according to the UFO JRC map, 75% cocoa according to a commodity map, or 20% deforestation prior to 2020 according to the GLAD alert map. So that is what I just showed you already in WISP Earth map. What you saw there was that we had different results for the different maps. And that is exactly what zonal statistics are. It's just the different pixels, they are calculated, and then we have an output, what the percentage is that pixels of that respective map have been counted for your input geometry. I hope you're still with me. I know this is a bit complicated to follow, can be complicated to follow. Now, when we have the results of this, as you already saw before in WISP Earth map, the results flow into the decision diagram here on the right, at the end of which is the risk assessment. Let me go through this decision tree one by one. So if, for example, you have a plot and none of the maps that indicate tree cover are indicating tree cover here. So if you have no tree cover in 2020, that's automatically low risk. If there's no tree cover, either by the UFO map, the JAXA map, the ESA map, any map, you're good to go. If, however, there is tree cover in 2020, the next important step is to check whether there was a commodity in 2020. And now, if a map has already indicated commodity cover in 2020, that is also low risk. Why is that? Well, often cocoa and coffee from space, from satellite imagery, are detected as tree cover. But if at the same time a map is also indicating that this pseudo tree cover was cocoa or coffee, then there was no deforestation. And therefore, if you say tree cover in 2020, yes, but commodity in 2020 also, yes, then you have low risk. Going through this further, let me just look at the time. Yeah, we're still good. If you had tree cover in 2020 for your plot, yes, but no commodity indicated there, we check for the next point, and that is if there have been disturbances before 2020. And now this is interesting. If there has been a disturbance before 2020, this is also low risk. Why is that? I mean, I've already said that twice now, and it's something that probably makes every foresters and nature conservationists heart bleed. But disturbances that happened before 2020 are not relevant to the EUDR, and quite to the contrary, if there has been deforestation before 2020, there's no risk of deforestation after 2020, hence it's a low risk plot. Now, if you had tree cover in 2020, no commodity in 2020, no disturbance before 2020, but disturbance after 2020. This is where you get to the point that you have to really pay attention. That can potentially be a high risk plot, and you really need to see and wonder if you want to sell this and export this to a European market. Now we have another case in between, which is still an output that comes out quite often, which is if there was a map indicating tree cover in 2020, but none of these others coming out with a yes, then that means that it is really unclear what there is. So let me just logically explain this again. So you have a plot, say you have a polygon. You have tree cover there in 2020. You have no commodity indicated there in 2020, no disturbance indicated before 2020, and no disturbance indicated after 2020. And the question is, why is there tree cover? Why is tree cover indicated there on your plot that you claim to grow a commodity on, such as cocoa, palm oil, or coffee? And this is where we get to more info needed, which is where you should probably take some pictures of the fields and find more corroborating evidence for making the case that this is the deforestation-free plot. I hope that was understandable, especially this last one can be a little difficult, but if you have questions, we'll have a little bit of time for that afterwards. Now, let me iterate once again that the use of regional and national maps can significantly improve the WISP deforestation risk assessment results. So if you are such an actor that has access to that or the possibility to make way for such national or regional maps to be incorporated in WISP, please reach out to us. We are very keen on also talking with the political governmental structures that might need to be involved, and we will do our best to incorporate also the national maps into WISP. We were successful in doing so in Côte d'Ivoire, which is also, well, it is the biggest cocoa producer in the world, and that significantly improved the risk assessments for the cocoa sector in Côte d'Ivoire. Now, let's look at this once more. I already showed you WISP Earth Map now, but there's also the API. And the API is something that we use for bulk processing, because if you have like 500 plots, for example, putting them all into WISP Earth Map is a very strenuous task. Let me get out of the presentation and show you this. So in order to use the WISP API, we go to wisp.openforest.org. You can just use it like that, but you can also register, and then you'll be able to process more and use the API also in your own software solutions. But that's only for the programmers here. If you're not a programmer, don't worry about that too much. So here you can submit a geometry file. Say you have a GeoJSON file for 300 plots somewhere in Nigeria, for example. Then you can just upload it here, and take it right from your computer. I'm taking these example polygons that we have for Wisp here, but you can use any other as well. Just keep in mind that currently we have a threshold of a maximum of 500 geometries to be processed at once. When I have them here, I just click Analyze. This takes a moment for me to take a sip of water. And here we go. Just show as many of them as possible. Now here we get very comprehensive statistics out from Wisp. So this basically did the same as what I showed you in Wisp Earth Map earlier, just for data in bulk. Now here you can see all the different polygons that I uploaded. This is the hectarage that you can see here. This respective countries where the polygon is located. You have the admin level 1, so there are some here in Ashanti region of Ghana. We have some in South Sumatra in India, Cote d'Ivoire and the Département Lagune, and so on. And then you can scroll to the right and you get a lot of statistics, most of which are probably not relevant to you. But we have disaggregated them fully because some actors need them. But if you go all the way to the end here, you can see here the different indicators. So if there was tree cover, for example, for your plot, if there was commodity cover, if there was a disturbance before 2020 or after 2020. And then we also have a couple of new indicators that were added recently for timber. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to go into the new timber functionalities of Wisp today, but if you're interested in that, please reach out to us and we can make one of the next webinars around the timber algorithm. Now, having all these indicators here, those are the ones, remember, that I just showed you in this flow chart. Tree cover, commodity in 2020, disturbance before and after 2020. It's exactly the ones that you can see here. They go, only these 4 here. They go through the decision tree. And at the end of it, you have these risk outputs here. You have risk P crop for perennial crops, risk A crop for annual crops, and risk timber. The ones, risk A crop is only relevant for soy in terms of EUDR, timber obviously only for timber. And P crop is for everything else. So that is cocoa, coffee, rubber, and palm oil. Now let me go back to the slides here. Oh. So again, if you're conducting deforestation risk assessments on crops such as cocoa, coffee, rubber, or owl palm, the relevant risk assessment output is in the column risk P crop. If you conduct assessments for soy plots, use the risk assessments for risk A crop. And we recently created a specific decision tree for deforestation risk on timber plots, which is a very unique situation requiring a different approach. And if you'd like more information or even a full webinar, please reach out. Finally, there's also a risk category for cattle raising plots that is currently in the making. We will let you know when that one is ready. Finally, you may want to visualize the outputs from Wisp API in dashboard. For that, my dear colleague Aurélie Shapiro created these nice dashboards here. After downloading the results from Wisp API as a CSV file, you can import them into the dashboard files that you can download under these links. I think they're not clickable right now. I'll put them into the chat when we are in the discussion part. Okay, let me quickly go out again because I just recognized in the Wisp API didn't show you the export functionality. So you can download these either as CSV files, that is a standard tabular file format that is readable by Excel, but also a lot of other softwares. It's one of the most basic open formats that is out there. It's very light and really the best one to use. And you can also download, again, as a GeoJSON file, but now with all these columns attached. And you can also view them. You can have a map view here. Oh, I forgot about that one. That was just implemented last week by a colleague of mine, which is very nice. You can have a map view here. The interesting part is you can also view them in WISP map. So now that we processed in bulk in WISP app, we can actually switch back to WISP Earth map to actually see them. So you have them here one by one. But if you have like 500, it becomes a little strenuous to go through it here. But if you want to have a look at a particular plot because for some reason you don't understand why it got a high risk categorization, then you can have a closer look here and maybe decide for yourself if it really is high risk or if you think it's still fun. And yeah, if you download this as a CSV, you can also use it in the dashboards I just showed you. So shortcuts. All right. Now that we have had some interesting input on the Nigerian cocoa and palm oil sector and a deep dive on WISP, let's go into the discussion. Or no, you know what? Actually, I saw there are a couple of questions that were coming in, so maybe let's go for the questions first. There's one. Nico's raising his hand. Yes, please, Nico.
Yeah, I was curious about the delineation of the smallholder farms of less than 4 hectares having a technical requirement for just like a coordinate, like,
yes,
you know, and how that might be treated differently in the system versus a plot that required polygons.
So what we are doing right now is when you have a point, by default, you will have in WISP also some pixel over that, but it's only that pixel that intersects with the point that we are counting. We were looking at maybe using buffers, but we saw in the field that the plots are sometimes so small that if you actually use those buffers, it can be counterproductive because in some regions you have a lot of fields that are directly adjacent to natural forest. So playing with these buffers is a little dangerous, and we deemed it the most appropriate to just go by the pixel that intersects with the GPS point.
Good solution.
Your hand still
Thank you.
Okay.
No, I'll take it out. Thank you so much.
Okay. Is there another question? I see there are some questions in the chat. So first, Bernard, you mentioned there's 500 limit per upload. Is there a total submission limit per user per month? Straight answer, no, there's not. There's no submission limit per month. It's just at the moment we have to stick to 500 because otherwise we will get an overload, which we are also working on, but no submission limit per user per month. Then Juan Fernando from GIZ Ecuador, I think. You have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks a lot. Just adding that to what the person that spoke prior to me is that we tried to process around 20,000 data with points and polygons through the API, 500 at a time. And to be honest, on the points that were around 10,000, we had more than 60 or 70% the reply from the system that more info was needed. So with the points, the precision, or as you mentioned, if it's too close to a forest or something, there's always the request of more info. So we are trying to collect, even if the plot is less than 4 hectares, we are trying to collect a polygon just because it's easier for the producer and for us to give them like a better scanning of the situation and the risk assessment. And the other question I had and I put in the chat is, what happened if the forest layer of the national country or the national area has some kind of different definition of what is forest and is uploaded to the WIS system, how this interacts with the algorithm. For example, taking into account that there is like the FAO definition and there could be some kind of specifications or different approach to forest agroforestry at the national level.
Yeah, that is a good question. I'm just quickly seeing Andy Arnell. Did you? Ah, yeah. Oh, you have your mic open. Do you have an answer to that?
Hello, I do have.
Great.
Yeah, nice. I've just changed my camera. There we go. See if it's going to be better.
Just a quick intro. That's Andrew Arnell. He's one of the main developers behind WISP, and he just joined to be available for the discussion. Thanks for joining, Andy.
Cool. Thanks, Jonas, and nice to meet you all. And a good question. So I have in terms of the national maps of forest, there's a couple of aspects. On the first pass, if it doesn't meet the EUDR criteria for forest, it wouldn't be included in WISP. So we are starting to include some national data sets now, but if it isn't over the 10% threshold within, I think it's 0.5 hectares, and of the certain height, we'd do that check. And if it wasn't that, then we wouldn't include it for a start. But then if it was included, if it's got a very high threshold, say for forest cover, say a dense forest, for most instances, the way we have it, it wouldn't make too much of a difference because a lot of other data sets would pick up forest first in most situations. So it may not add that much. It wouldn't be detrimental. But what it could do is add, if it was say a dry biome that wasn't very well covered in the data sets we have at the moment, it could pick up forest where others did not, and therefore it would be a useful addition. So I don't know if that answers your question. One thing I would actually add, though, before maybe you respond, is that commodity maps can be therefore a bit more useful because they added if you've got good national commodity maps, they may have the benefit of being able to distinguish where it's likely to be agroforestry or cocoa that has been that the remote sensing products for forest have picked up incorrectly, and it then could allow them to prove, in a way, help prove that it isn't forest, and therefore they are at the moment in the decision tree probably more useful to include than the forest or the tree cover. I don't know if hopefully that answered your question a little bit. Similarly, if you have any other questions, you can message us about how things get included. We're happy to discuss.
Yeah, Juan, you still have your hand up. So I think we naturally just slipped into the discussion here. So please speak.
No, just thank a lot for the reply, Arnel. It does reply my question. It's just that we have seen that not only agroforestry is one of the issues regarding the definition of forest or the false positives that we had in WISP, but there's also some issues in the specific parts of the country where you have really old cocoa farms where the trees of cocoa are higher than 5 to 6 meters, like they are really, really old cocoa trees, and they are detected because of the size of the plot as forests in sometimes. So, yeah, of course, agroforestry and those kind of cases can create some kind of false positives, and that's why we are trying to promote the national government just to have the national layer of forest and no forest. But regarding the reply on commodity maps, that could also improve the assessment. So that's a really good recommendation, and we're going to see if they have it here in Ecuador. But thanks a lot for the reply.
Thanks very much. That's great.
All right, in the chat, there's also a question by Dave Hale asking, can you zoom out to show all plots uploaded on the map? This is a likely use case. Let me just ask, can you elaborate a little bit on the question, please, Dave? Do you mean WISP Earth Map or in WISP API visualization purposes in QGIS?
Yeah, so my question is basically, if say I upload 500 plots, I'm a cooperative in, for example, Ecuador, I would get within a minute or so the response via GeoJSON or CSV. Is it possible then to zoom out and show all 500 plots within my cooperative on a map so that I could see those visually? The alternative, of course, is to take that GeoJSON file and upload it into Google Earth Engine or some other visualization mechanism. But I'm just wondering if I can do that and then see all plots.
Yeah. So you can kind of see that here in WISP Earth Map. Now the output would be a little less than ideal. You would probably just have to take a screenshot. What we see here is 3 of those, but those are
Perfect.
very far apart, right? But yeah, you can definitely do that. Besides, I almost forgot about that. We have also now created a WISP API plugin for QGIS. When you're a QGIS user, you can simply go to manage and install plugins and search for WISP. And you can just install it here. So you can also just WISP your files here. Also, when there are shape files or geopackage files, no need to convert to GeoJSON first. It's all handled by the code. And then you get the output straight in your QGIS, which is probably helpful for a lot of the geospatial people out there.
And a related question, which formats are allowable for uploads via the API or via the website?
API, through the API, it's only GeoJSON.
Okay.
But this QGIS plugin, for example, can handle other ones, but it's automatically going to convert to GeoJSON before sending it.
Okay. So if I have a CSV file or an Excel file or something else, I would have to convert to a compatible format before uploading.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Thanks.
And then I see another question by Eleni Dereje. Hope I said that right. I'll just read it out loud. So if there was a manual data collection on the ground and build data set and drop it on WISP, it can show previous forestation and deforestation. Is there a required data collection tools to access far areas? Okay, I think this is a quite general question. So WISP can show previous deforestation, for example. Let me just show it right here again. So here we have for example, these deforestation alerts from the GLAD data set by Hansen et al. From University of Maryland. And here you can see disaggregated by year, for example, because this data set is constantly being developed. So it reaches as far back as 2001, I think, on Landsat data, and is continuously. So they update every year for the previous year. I'm not sure if the 2024 update is already out, but the latest one by them is 2023. And the other question there was, is there a required data collection tool? So no, you can just use any tool. Anybody who has a little bit of training on using geographical information systems, it's very easy to convert GeoJSON. And then you can just upload it to WISP and get your results. It's really not difficult. If you have troubles with that, need a little bit of support, you can shoot me an email and I can point you at some resources. If I didn't get your question right, or you have anything else to add, Eleni, please speak up. Now we have some more questions here. For all other criteria like land rights and human rights, yeah, WISP cannot cover these questions. This is more going into like the CSVVV, I suppose, where you're going with this question. No, WISP cannot handle this because most of what we're working with is satellite imagery, and satellite imagery is not capable, obviously, for finding human rights violations or something. When it comes to land rights, I don't know, but really this is not what we can cover, unfortunately. Greg, you asked where could the QGIS plugin be downloaded? So if you have QGIS installed, Greg, you do by default have plugins here. You click Manage and Install Plugins, and it just opens this window, and you just type WISP there, and there you have it. It's in the QGIS plugin repository.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jonas. That's really, really great.
Cool. And then Stu Stremmel from Lightwell LLC asks, what about combining these datasets with biodiversity map datasets or road coverage power usage? Interesting question. From the top of my head, I'm not sure how this would relate directly to deforestation risk assessments. Generally speaking, you're absolutely free to clone our code from GitHub. I'm just going to, or maybe Andy, you can put the link to our GitHub repository in the chat. Great, thanks. And you can just clone it and put all these other maps there as well, if that is useful to your work. All right, if there's one last question, some person can raise their hand. Otherwise, we are at the end of today's webinar. Any last question? Okay, no, then let me just say again, the next session is planned to be in roughly 6 to 8 weeks. I know that we did not hold that promise the last time. It is because we had all these travels happening under AIM for Commodities, but we're looking to make the next webinar in 6 to 8 weeks. So roughly in late August, early September. Then thank you all for listening. Those are the partners involved here. Here are some image credits. And now I'm handing over to Pascal.
Yes, thanks, Jonas, for the great moderation and the great input. Also to you, Ralph. Also for the great discussion. This was super interesting again. And yeah, it's always great to get all your questions, critical questions and ideas in this round. I would like to let you know that the next DIASCA roundtable, giving a broader overview about the activities also in the other working groups, and also to get your inputs in the broader field, will take place on the 9th of July at 3 o'clock Central European Summer Time. I will share the link now here in the chat. I think all of you have received already an invitation and a save the date. So yeah, happy to see you there as well next week. And yeah, with this, I wish you all a great rest of the day.
Thank you all. Have a good day. Stay in here for a minute. Let's go.